Hey everybody, welcome to a special edition Jackrabbit Illustrated podcast. I'm Dallas, joined by a couple special guests here, and Chad. We'll get to the special guests here in a minute, but season's coming real quick here, getting really excited, and we've got a few pods lined up. We want to talk about some new topics and some things kind of outside of the norm for us, and today is going to be primarily talking about other conferences and just the general FCS landscape. And that's something that hopefully we'll have Brendan jump on here shortly. Matt's probably going to join us and just kind of get everybody's take on the FCS at large, because as Jackrabbit fans, one, it's strange and exciting to be favored the way that we are, right? I mean, it isn't arrogant, oddly enough, to say it's kind of us versus the field this year, which is just weird to say, and I feel gross. But honestly, it is true. We can debate that if anybody wants. But again, I want to hear about other teams, other conferences, and I don't know, just start talking through that a little bit. Start with you, Chad. How you doing today?
I'm doing. We're not going to get too deep into it.
Come on.
I've had a rough day.
You're here now.
I don't want to air it. I'm not proud. I didn't have one of my proudest days. Cost myself a bit of money and a fair amount of work. So, yeah.
All right, that's fine.
You don't want to back up too far when there's one 2x4 that's 2 foot longer than the rest.
Oh no.
And your brand new garage door will suffer.
Oh, gross. Nothing worse than fixing garage doors, dude.
Yeah.
So
that's why I didn't do it before I sold my house in Fargo. That's the next person's problem.
So that's a good transition. Tell us about those bison, Keith.
Yeah, hold on, all right. So let's transition here, jump in. Keith, since you spoke up, we have Keith Brake with us. He is the director of broadcasting at ETSU, East Tennessee. So do you want to talk about, I don't know, just kind of your squad, your background a little bit, then we'll jump over to Rev?
Yeah, so for the uninitiated, I was part of the Bison 1660 crew at North Dakota State for 6 seasons, from launch in 2016 with Jeff Colhane, and then I left shortly after Jeff when Jeff got the Florida State job. I had an opportunity to move back to Northeast Tennessee and call college football, Division I football for ETSU on ESPN+. I do men's basketball, I do women's basketball on the radio, and then a bunch of other sports. I wear a lot of different hats, do a lot of different stuff around here. But I'm obviously very familiar with the Valley, very familiar with the Jacks, and their arch nemesis farther north on I-29. And yeah, so I've been reacclimating to the SoCon for the last 14 months or so, and it's been a really fun experience. It's a very different experience, very different college football environment, very different culture from what I can kind of condition myself to in the Valley for 6 years. So, but excited to be back and excited for what should be a very interesting SoCon season. Certainly feels like there's a couple established players at the top. There's a clear dark horse third team, and then after that, it gets kind of interesting because there's not a lot to know about the other teams just yet.
Those are my favorite conversations. I can't wait to get into those for each, hopefully as many conferences as we can, kind of who that dark horse is. I know who mine is going to be for the Missouri Valley. But yeah, I guess just to clarify for everybody, Keith is essentially the Tyler Merriam of ETSU. And I'm curious, since you call it many sports, I know we're not interviewing you here. What's the toughest sport to call that you've ever, like what is something more difficult than another?
The hardest sport I've ever called, as I try to turn my microphone down a little bit here.
Oh,
no.
Are you on your
headset mic? The one you're on? Because
I'm on my webcam microphone.
Oh, but, okay. It's plenty warm, so you're good.
Okay, yeah, I can probably turn that down somewhere. It says automatically adjust my volume. Let's do that. Fine. How's that? Is that better?
Yeah,
because I just this is how I talk. I talk so.
You're not too loud. You're just a little. Yeah. You're just a little tin canny, and I thought it was because your mic was up on your head.
So
it's old-timey radio.
Funny story. In 2012, I was the play-by-play guy for the Johnson City Cardinals, rookie ball, and our manager was Oliver Marmol, who is now the manager of the St. Louis Cardinals. And the first time we got on a bus to go to Bristol, he said to me, "Hey Keith, how you doing?" He's very, he's like 24 at the time, very quiet guy, feeling his way around the situation. I had a much older coaching staff than him, and I said, "Ollie, I'm doing great. How are you?" And he said, "You always talk like you're on the radio." And I said, "Yes, Ollie, I do."
Radio vomit voice.
I have been that guy my entire life. But I'm sorry. What was your question?
No, I was.
What do you miss about Fargo other than the winter?
No. What?
My hardest sport to call.
Yeah.
The hardest sport to call is hockey. So I did some Fargo Force games, a few games
nice.
For Bison 1660, and a couple games for TV while I was up there. And because I grew up in the South, my father grew up in Detroit, so he brought some Red Wings love back with him to Tennessee when he went to Tennessee Tech, and met my mother, kind of settled down. The Red Wings were kind of America's team when I was a kid with the Russian Five and all that, and winning back-to-back cups. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. So I grew up wanting to be a hockey broadcaster. And then I did it for the first time. I said, this is the hardest damn thing I've ever done in my life, and I never want to do it again. It's chaos. Trying to no, you're all good, Chad. Trying to keep up with all the line changes and the action and describe it aptly for radio was really, really difficult. Every sport presents its own challenges. Football, you got to catch the personnel subs. If you don't, you can make yourself sound like you don't know what you're talking about. You can also do like baseball. You've got to figure out how to paint the picture and get all the little details like fielding alignment and also like where the ball is hit and does the fielder put it in his glove, like things that you wouldn't think that you have to think about. You have to start thinking about in order to describe it for an audience that's quite truly flying blind with the broadcast, because you're painting the picture for them on the radio. They can't see it. They can only hear what you tell them. So all the information they have is what you tell them. And so trying to bring that to hockey was really hard. I cut my teeth doing soccer, so I don't have as much of a problem with that sport. Actually, that was the first sport I called at ETSU way back in the day. I still have a picture of the 2010 ASUN champions that I called the championship winning goal for. Was pretty cool. But hockey is the most succinct answer to that question. And I agree, Jason. I've met Chris. He's great. We have talked about getting some etouffee airmailed in from New Orleans, where he was for the last 12 years. But I don't know if we're going to be able to make that happen. But Chris is a great addition to the men's basketball staff, and he's been awesome. That whole staff's been great. That team just feels completely different after the coaching change. So really excited for that group in the fall or in the winter. And women's basketball as well is going to be pretty good. But football going to be a little bit interesting. I think there's a lot of competition. There's a lot to prove for this group. And there's some really good guys and some really good young guys. And I think how this team comes together over the course of the next 30 days is going to determine a lot of what they're able to do over the subsequent 90.
Cool. So let's quick transition. Rev, if you want to kind of give yourself a little introduction here, and then we'll start rolling through conferences.
Yeah, so I'm the bunny that was in the end zone of the national championship.
You're so famous.
That's all you need to know. No, unlike Keith, who is awesome and covers college sports professionally, I do not.
That's a guy that hasn't spent 10 minutes in a room with me. No. I mean, Keith is awesome. No, you have not spent 10 minutes in a room with me.
No, but yeah, you guys know me. I'm on here all the time talking trash on FCS Fans Nation. So glad I got to come on here and, be on, on the podcast for, South Dakota State, because I am South Dakota State's favorite podcaster. So it's great. Sorry, man. I had to get that in once. I'm sorry.
Nope, I'm with you. I'm with you. So Rev, Stephen F. Austin, right? That's your team, your squad.
Yep.
Let's jump into conferences. We'll back up to Missouri Valley in a minute, but I'm curious, talk through the snarled mess that is the United Airlines conference now, or whatever you currently have.
Hey, listen, we love to ball and it shows, but it's really weird because the NCAA is still going to do the thing where they don't want to recognize the United as a conference. And so they're just basically, it's the wax sun with the new name, same sort of concept as last year, except better scheduling where we're actually playing, across the board and playing the other schools in the conference. So there, you don't have that issue of wow, Eastern Kentucky and Stephen F. Austin didn't play, and they're both tied, and you have to go through this point stuff and all that stuff. So this year's a little more simple. Whoever wins is going to get the one auto bid that's shared between the two conferences. So I actually like the logo that came out, even though it is United Airlines circa 1990. But I just hope the NCAA just stops with this. I think NCAA is still concerned that if they get recognized as a conference, they're going to try to make the whole FBS as a conference jump move, which anybody who followed this knows that wasn't a possible sort of thing. But no, it should be a good conference this year. There's 4 teams that could probably win it all, and we might get 2 out of them in the playoffs. So I think it'll be pretty much better quality ball than last year for sure.
I see that SFA hasn't jumped up in the rankings quite like they did last year to begin with, have they?
No, Idaho is SFA this year. Sorry, Chris, but it's it's true. SFA got so much love, even though because they had the offensive weapons last year. They had Xavier Gibson. They had Self, who was a decent quarterback, but they lost so much in defense. And then the same thing has happened again this year. We brought in coach from Tulane and Coach Mons. And so it's still sort of the same thing. There's a lot of what sort of defense are we going to see? I hope we can see a defense that can actually stop the run this year, because last year the Lumberjacks were quite porous when it came to their defense. So no, I would rather them not be in the preseason top 25, but also I don't believe in preseason polls. So, but I would rather them come in as a dark horse than have all the focus on them like they were last year, because they definitely weren't ready for it.
So back up to kind of standings, and I'm trying to get it pulled up from last year. So just to kind of echo what Rev said. So you've got right now what's the United Athletic Conference. It was a strange combination of the WAC and the ASUN together, and then as you alluded to, there was just this bizarre, ranking that came out of it where it required getting the Sun into alignment and goring an ox, and I'm not sure exactly what they what sort of voodoo
it was bad
was involved there, but I cannot find just kind of talk through top to bottom how that combined conference played out last year.
Well, Eastern Kentucky was the team that got the playoff bid. They were 7-4, if I remember correctly, and they won the ASUN part of the conference. And then they got beat by Gardner-Webb in the playoffs, which was absolutely embarrassing. But then after that, it was, I think SFA technically finished second because they won the WAC side of it. Austin P was up there as well.
Oh, Central Arkansas was also in there. Okay.
Yeah, Central Arkansas, and then you get to the rest of the schools that don't matter, like Abilene Christian and Tarleton. Those schools that nobody cares about. We saw some surprises last year. We saw Southern Utah have a better year. We saw Utah Tech kind of put things together in their second year at Division I, which really makes me think top to bottom this year it's going to be a stronger conference. I still think it's going to be between – I honestly am not picking SFA to win it. I will come out fourth in conference. I think it's going to be between Austin P and Eastern Kentucky on who's going to win the conference. They both are solid teams. Eastern Kentucky brings back just about all their weapons. And so it's really easy to pick them. I think Central Arkansas is one to look at too. I don't think they're going to get a lot of love because they just couldn't put everything together the right way last year. But, they have Darius Hale coming back, and Darius Hale is an incredible running back. They've got McElwain at QB. So UCA has the weapons to win it. It'll annoy me because all I'll hear is Will Seiler chirp about it. But,
And if anybody's not familiar with them, they're the team with the cool field, or not cool if you don't think it is, but not cool. You don't like the colors.
Their field looks like a cheap tie you buy at Walmart when you need a winter wedding.
It's the purple I don't like.
I saw a couple of those ties earlier this month. Yeah, I saw a few of those. Thankfully, I was not wearing one myself.
And the name McElvain will sound familiar because he came from the Missouri Valley, transferred down there out of UNI. I think Jack's fans will know that name. Other teams out of the new United Conference, and I navigated away. Southern Utah, Jack should be familiar with them. Was Kennesaw before they made the jump. They were involved. So those are the two teams I think that we'd probably be most familiar with.
Yeah, you guys would know us just because we beat you in basketball this year. That's really the reason why, or last year. That's the reason why
one time.
So,
I am ultra football biased, or like I'm myopic. I don't watch much else, so Brendan will jump in. Brendan, welcome.
Hi. I don't even know what to jump in about. I just hear we're talking about the yuck. It seems like I think I still got grass on my face from mowing the lawn because I forgot.
Glad to see you punctual, bud.
Yeah,
nice
timing is everything.
I like that.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I've had people offer me like $40 for this hat. Anyways, that's not terribly important to anything. I literally don't know what we're talking about yet.
So
you could introduce yourself. But everybody knows you here. So maybe we should switch over to not to be confusing, but we should switch from Brendan to Brandon.
We should.
Yes. As he's taking a drink. I'm so
sorry.
Wait,
whoa. We don't let FBS in here. I don't know why we have Brandon.
How did
here.
That happen?
Huh?
I can't see USA up there.
All I can hear is something Southern.
All I can hear is guarantee check.
Yeah.
See you on September 2nd.
All right, so everyone that's listening, because most folks listen and don't watch, we had another guest jump in here, Brandon Owens, who is technically. Are you technically FBS yet or not? How does that work?
We are FBS.
You are officially now FBS.
Yes, we are still in transition.
All right. So,
and
but
you're the
anyway,
band director where?
Hamilton High School. It's in a small town, Hamilton, Alabama.
well, either way, appreciate you jumping on. So, anything, I guess, real quick again, because I want to do as much as we can talking about other conferences. What conference did your squad just leave? And maybe give us a little rundown there if you would.
We left Jacksonville State left the ASUN, which is now the United Athletic Conference, which it makes me mad that we moved Conference USA because this is the conference I really wanted us in. But yeah, so it's just, yeah.
Yeah, can we hate on Conference USA because they're definitely the third or fourth best FCS conference right now. So.
Yep. So what? Yeah, we want to get at here. And actually, does somebody want to give a Fans Nation plug here? Because we probably should have done that to start out. Because that's where these guys came from. If you do not currently subscribe to the podcast, if you don't watch them on YouTube, Rev, do you want to jump in and tell us how everybody finds you?
Yeah. So you can.
Everybody's got Wi-Fi problems today. What's happening?
FCS Fans Nation on Twitter, or it might just be Fans Nation.
I think it's those guys in the southern.
Yeah.
No, sorry. Anyway, you can find us on YouTube at FCS Fans Nation. You can find us on Twitter, Facebook, a plethora of podcasts that cover everything from the Valley to across the country to the United. Keith has got a show on there also, the Breakdown. So
Jay and Keith, it's Jay and Keith show with.
Jay and Keith. I'm sorry. Yeah, Jay and Keith. Yeah.
Hey, the brand is still strong. I appreciate it. My mom got me a T-shirt with that logo on it. Now the logo didn't last very long, but I still got the T-shirt.
My mom's never listened to any of these, so you got a leg up on me. All right, all right, so before Keith, I want to jump into SoCon a little bit because that is a very interesting conference to me. I'm really curious to hear more about Samford, who I don't know enough about other than the quarterback. But I want to back up here, and Brendan, you can jump in wherever you want because you've got a better kind of across the board, I think, view of the just general landscape than I do. But I want to go back to 2022 and just to go kind of top to bottom, and we'll use the Sagarin ratings. You can debate if that is better than the other one, whatever. But statistical ratings of kind of conference strength. And if you look at just FCS, you got Missouri Valley, which there's always. I'm curious to hear some of you other guys' commentary on whether it's just super top heavy or not. I thought that was a little overblown last year, but maybe I'm wrong. But Missouri Valley, and then Big Sky, which I would love to have represented here, but we're not. So Big Sky is going to be your Montana schools, right? Are going to be the ones you're most familiar with. Montana State's coming in this year. Can't wait for that one. Idaho. And those guys out that way. And then last year it was ASUN, Southern, and WAC. So again, ASUN and WAC are going to be the same. Colonial, And sorry, somebody rattle off a couple Colonial teams for me. I'm drawing a
They're not
blank.
the
William and
Colonial.
Mary.
They're not Colonial.
Oh, no, that's
Coastal.
right. I knew
They're
that.
the Coastal.
They're the Coastal.
Carolina or
Yeah, the
something,
coastal.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because somehow that's more important or something.
It's the dumb. I thought the United Athletic Conference was a dumb name, and they beat us with it. So, but no, Dallas. It's like Delaware, New Hampshire,
Yep.
those hacks in Rhode Island.
The Rhode Island. Yes, everybody should be familiar with the Rhode Island hacks at this point.
Sleepy Joes.
Yep.
Well, they've added gobs of teams recently as well, too, with North Carolina A&T, Monmouth, things like that.
And then Ivy League, which I choose not to count until they decide to
They-
join the playoffs.
They don't
Cowards.
count as people.
Cowards. Big South, Ohio Valley, Southland Patriot, SWAC. Anyway, on and on and on, right down to the Pioneer. So, let's jump back up. And are you guys good if we do talk Missouri Valley first here or next? I guess run through that. Okay. So last year, top to bottom, Missouri Valley, everybody should be comfortable with. South Dakota State 1, Cows 2, Youngstown, North Dakota, UNI, Illinois State, Southern Illinois. The biggest collapse in the history of organized sports, Missouri State.
Back to misery.
Back to Missouri State. USD, Indiana State, and Western Illinois Junior College. So that
Somehow
was
they still were better than the Oats.
Which is amazing. Good for them. Good for them. Well,
So-
and I'm sure Keith has some good opinions on this as well, because I don't know if anybody's mentioned it yet on the show. I lived in Fargo for a while and used to listen to Keith on the radio on the breakdown, and God damn it, you would irritate the shit out of me sometimes.
Good. That's what I was there for. That's what I was there for.
You're phenomenal at it.
Yeah. Well, hey, you know what?
I respect it, though.
When I got into that market, I think you could have done a little bit worse. I don't know that you could have done a lot worse, but you could have done a little bit worse. Yeah, man. No, I think the Valley is the best conference in the country, and I think it's because you have the two best teams in the country. And I really do believe that it's the two best teams by a fair margin, because Montana State still has to prove that one team or the other isn't going to eat their lunch at the line of scrimmage for 60 minutes. I told Sam Herder that. As Brent Vegan is, I mean, he's a Valley guy, right? Like, he's an upper Midwest. He comes from that same culture. He's a quarterback in Fargo, and then the offensive coordinator. And a lot of people wanted to fire him even when they were winning national titles. But he knows what he has to do. That is his challenge. And until Montana State clears that bar, it's tough for me to look at them and say just like unequivocally, this team has to be taken seriously. Now, this could be the year, right? Any year could be the year, but they haven't done it yet. So for me, South Dakota State at home in front of what should be an amazing crowd at DJD is going to do what most people would expect a team that's one of the best, if not the best, in the trenches in the country to do to Montana State, which still has great skill talent, but they got a lot of things that they still got to figure out in the trenches against those teams that are used to dominating the trenches, that have built their identity around dominating the trenches. And those two teams at the top of the Valley are basically like upper middle Mountain West teams. They're really good at a level where teams don't have nearly that many scholarships, don't have nearly that big a budget, resources. Even schools in their own conference don't have the same level of resources that North Dakota State and South Dakota State are able to bring to bear. And that, to me, makes them the premier conference in the country, because there is just so much power at the top. In terms of depth, you're going to see more Big Sky teams get in this year, I would imagine, than Valley teams. You could be looking at 5, maybe 6. Some of that is going to be due to a less balanced schedule, because I believe there are still more teams in the Big Sky than there are in the Valley. That's changing, right? It's getting closer. Mm-hmm. The gap is closing, but the Big Sky, I've talked about this. I thought, Brendan, you probably heard me talk about this many times on the radio show, the Big Sky scheduling Powerball, right? Sometimes you just win, like Cal Poly in 16 won the lottery and ran roughshod through the Big Sky schedule that they got. And then they fumbled the football 3 times and lost to San Diego at home.
I remember that.
Yeah, like their schedule looks so good, and you're like, wow, a triple option team winning in the Big Sky. Gee, I wonder why. Oh, okay. And Northern Arizona, the same thing happened to them the next year, because they snuck into the playoffs because they were in the Big Sky. They were able to win more games than they lost, and I watched that game against San Diego, and Northern Arizona looked like they didn't even want to be there. Like that unbalanced schedule creates an environment where you can get more teams in, but when those teams stack up with the heavyweights at the top of a conference that has a more balanced schedule, like the Valley or the SoCon, which does have an actual like full-on everybody plays everybody, instead of like the Valley, which has traditionally been like one team is off the schedule, then it was two. I think it's going back to one next year when Western Illinois goes to the OVC. That creates an environment where you get a better reflection of a team's caliber relative to their conference. And Jeff Choate, when he was the head coach at Montana State, said the same thing. We don't really have a great measuring stick by playing a bunch of different teams every year in the Big Sky. So I think the Big Sky is going to get more teams in the playoffs than the Valley, but I don't know that makes them a better conference, as paradoxical as that may seem.
Where would you say like UNI would have ended up if they played a Big Sky schedule last year? A team that's traditionally just on the cusp of getting into the playoffs, but they play, NDSU and SDSU every year.
Well, Mark Farley's schedule's out of his mind every year anyway.
6-5, I know.
Because I think they're probably going to be one of those teams that just, I don't know. Northern Iowa's always weird because it takes them a couple of games to really get rolling. And by the time they get rolling, they're already in a 1-2 hole and they have to climb out, and they do it. But at the same time, you schedule so aggressively on the front end when you're in a conference that's already really good. It kind of prepares you for the postseason. It kind of prepares you for the conference, but it also beats you up and it puts you in a position where it's more difficult to get a seed. And I've had this conversation with people just talking about the landscape of football, because there's a discourse around the SoCon right now about whether the conference should expand and add more football schools. And some people believe that it should, and some people believe that it shouldn't. And there are reflections of that in the FCS media landscape. I happen to be one of them. There are some other people that are very vocally against the idea of expansion that are in the FCS media landscape. And the reality of it is that if you play an unbalanced schedule, you're more likely to get more of your heavyweights in because they're less likely to have to play each other.
Yeah,
based on the scheduling matrix.
Yep, you don't get beat up as much.
Yeah.
Hold on. Let's back out. I wanna, if you don't mind, I wanna button up Missouri Valley here, and then move on to we can do either Big Sky or SoCon a bit more. But Brendan, I'm curious. Looking at, we got a preseason poll here, and you can take anyone you want. But all right, SDSU, NDSU. Northern Iowa 3, North Dakota 4, Youngstown 5, Southern Illinois 6, Missouri State 7, Illinois State 8, USD Yotes 9, Indiana State 10, Western Illinois 11, and newcomer something called Murray State 12. All right, Brendan, would you...
Racers. They're a bunch of racists.
Not sure what they're racing.
Well, they have cars. All I know is they have cars in the backside of their stadium. That's what I know from pictures. So, Brendan, a couple questions. Anything you horribly disagree with in that poll, and who would be your dark horse to surprise people this year?
I'm going to be honest. The thing I disagree with, honestly, I mean, it depends, because like Keith was saying, we're playing the schedule Powerball here, but it almost feels like it was purposeful with who got to play Western Illinois and Murray State. Yeah. Because if you look, SDSU does not get to play Western Illinois and Murray State. I think NDSU only gets one of them. I think UNI only gets one of them. But who gets both of them? I think USD does. I think for sure. Indiana State does. I think Illinois State does. It's almost like the conference is throwing a bone to some of these teams to try to help boost the image, because if you have two really bad teams that get beat up on by your middle teams while your top teams are playing each other, they're going to stay the top teams. But it's going to make the overall conference look better and help inflate some win totals. And I think USD is going to end up around that 5 mark just by virtue of their schedule and how it lays out for them, to be honest. I don't think they'll be the 5th best team, but I think because of schedule, they're going to end up making the playoffs probably, especially, as we all know, the new offensive coordinator there and everything, that'll make a big difference for them as well. The dark horse I would throw out there is UNI, because if I'm not mistaken, NDSU has to go to the Unidome.
Mm-hmm.
And with this being such a pivotal season, something that I find important is UNI has brought back their defensive coordinator that they had during all their super stellar defenses they had for years and years and years. He's come back. He was gone last year. He's come back. Heard all sorts of crazy stories about issues that UNI was having early in the year with the defensive coordinator they had. I don't know if they're true or not, but I think UNI will be vastly improved, and that could be a serious problem for NDSU traveling down there in a year where they're going to have to, if they decide to just run the ball and UNI is able to up their game pat with the defense where they were uncharacteristically bad last year. If they up their game on defense and NDSU is so heavy on the run game and decides that they only need to pass when they're forced to, so they're not, I don't think Cam Miller is as bad as people think. He just he's not used to passing the ball because they don't use him. So that could be a big switch. I could see UNI actually taking that one. Otherwise, I have some doubts about Youngstown State. They seem to be a big preseason darling, but when you lose a running back like McLaughlin,
see, that's
man, I know their fans are all amped up and they were all butthurt at me because I don't care that they didn't make the playoffs, because I truly could not care less that Youngstown State didn't make the playoffs. I don't care, because you know what? I don't want 3 Valley teams on our side of the bracket anyways. The hell with them. Don't make the playoffs. I hope none of them make the playoffs. Because I don't want to see them again. But I don't know. They could be as improved as everybody's saying, in the dark horse that a lot of people like to pick. I'm not sold on them being the dark horse. If I'm picking a dark horse to win the conference, UNI would be the one with the most potential, because SDSU and UNI and Hobo Day is just kryptonite. It's my nightmare.
God.
And
100%.
we saw it coming.
To lose.
My chest is getting tight hearing you talk about it.
We all saw that game get scheduled. And for the rest of the guys on here who aren't SDSU fans, but you probably heard about us bitch about it on Twitter. We've scheduled UNI like the last, 4 out of 5, at least 3 out of 5 Hobo Days, and we've lost every damn one of them. So you've got UNI getting us on Hobo Day, which is their absolute favorite time to ever play us ever. And then they get NDSU at home. I could see a potential where UNI sneaks in and wins the conference. Now because they're UNI, I could see them being like, have 3, maybe 4 losses, just because that's the way they would roll into that. But I could still see them winning the conference by sneaking 2 out of the Dakota States, just because that would be the most UNI thing to do ever.
So looking at we got their schedule pulled up here quick, and they've got Indiana State.
That's a favorable schedule.
Hell yeah, it is. They've got Western Illinois, at Missouri State, November 11th, which they'll have given up and gone on vacation long before that. Western Illinois. So I mean, honestly, if things go well for UNI, they could bring in North Dakota State, thinking they're going to get a freaking seed. I mean, seriously, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility. So I both like and hate your UNI pick. I still, with Youngstown, it's more like every 4 years they pull something out of their ass and feel scary for a minute, and that's kind of just, it feels like they're due to me.
Yeah, and it's not like when SDSU goes plays them, I'm going to think they're terrible or anything, but I just have a hard time buying the top 3-4 team in the conference till I see it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess looking at that, it's feasible if things go the way Matt called it. Not that I disagree with what he had to say about us losing Hobo Day. They could be undefeated in conference going into playing the Bison.
But they'll totally UNI it. They'll UNI it and they'll lose to Illinois State. And then they'll be going into that game looking to win a share of the conference. But that's probably we talk MVFC all the time.
Yeah, let's. Do you want to move on? Let's.
Yeah.
Do you want to do the same thing?
I was
Big
thinking SoCon, just out
SoCon?
of curiosity with Keith.
Yes,
What's
please
it
do.
like coming from NDSU and then going to, I know your alma mater at ETSU, and talking to SoCon fans about it, because I know there is a large contingent spurred on by somebody online that get very upset about the amount of playoff teams they do or don't get, and having a true round robin schedule, which honestly I know everybody prefers. But what's that like down there in explaining to people the difference between the conferences? And because I imagine that's a question that comes up.
And the best barbecues in Texas, why?
Well, we just had a guy leave for Muscle Shoals that would tell you that the best barbecue is in northern Alabama, because that's where he's from. It's a shame Brandon's not still here, because he's a North Alabama Lion. Our guy Mike Ezekiel is going to be the new sports information director down there.
I thought you were calling Brandon the North Alabama Lion. That was going to be hilarious.
No, but he's suspiciously close to Muscle Shoals in Florence. I don't know why that is. Anyway, talking to people about football is interesting, because I'm talking to people about football at a basketball school. ETSU has an enormous tradition in hoops. I actually have one of the cassette tapes. Actually, I have it right here. It's in the recorder, but this is a
Look
tape.
at that thing.
This is a cassette tape of ETSU's most recent NCAA men's basketball tournament win against Arizona in 1992. And if I take this out in public, somebody would fist fight me for it. So it's a huge deal. Basketball is a huge deal. Tim Smith got a spread in Sports Illustrated and hung on my office wall for about 5 minutes before we decided we were going to give it to Tim as part of his retiring his jersey. It's a huge basketball tradition. There's not as much tradition around football. So football is kind of FCS football is kind of a new thing for a lot of people. They know about App State and the success they had. They know about Georgia Southern and Marshall for the long timers in 1996 when they had 90 scholarships or however many. They had a lot of scholarships because they were in the transition, and that's how the rule got changed when they won their national championship. But it's a very different experience. But also at the same time, I can explain to people, hey, the imbalanced schedule is hurting us. This is this, and they buy it. Like, they understand it, and it's plausible to them. And once you introduce people to that landscape, I think they really start to grasp and understand the realities that sit over FCS football and where the SoCon sits in them.
So for those of you listening, because most of you are, Keith just held up a tape recorder that is clearly older than he is, probably a decade. That is unbelievable. Where did you get that?
Casio, a Seikio? Who makes
the
that?
Magic of the Buccaneer Sports Network. But this is, it's not focusing. But,
there it is.
There it is.
Arizona
Yeah.
versus
March
the
20th, 1992.
Tennessee.
Yeah, that's our last NCAA tournament win.
That was
So
amazing.
I got a question for you, Keith, because I've started to come around to this thinking after seeing a lot of SoCon fans and interacting with them and things like that. If I were to liken the SoCon to a professional sports fan base, I would call them Major League Baseball fans, because all they care about is tradition. They never ever want to change, and everybody else is wrong and stupid for doing it.
Yeah.
They're very proud, very, very proud of wins in the 20s. I'm just saying.
Well, there is a section of the fan base, and it's true, and I think that is something that upper administration at some of the universities is bought into. And this is something that we talked about with the new commissioner, Michael Cross, at SoCon Media Days, when in his remarks to the gathered head coaches and SIDs and athletes, that the SoCon is he broke out a Phil Parcells quote, but he said the SoCon is kind of cliquey a little bit. It's very divided. There are groups of schools. There's a group that wants to expand. There's a group that very much doesn't. There are different groups that want to do a lot of different things that are at odds with each other. And nobody's really been able to get this group on the same page. But there is certainly a group that believes that the SoCon has a deserved place at the top of FCS football, because this is the conference of App State and Georgia Southern and Marshall, and well, those 8 national championships aren't in this conference.
Yeah,
and that greatest upset in college football history that happened while App is in your conference, they're not in your conference.
Yeah, it's not there anymore.
Right, and so there needs to be a new identity forged with the existing membership, and that is something that when you tell people around the Tri-Cities, you go to Chattanooga, you tell people, they all buy into that. They all believe that, yeah, like let's move this forward. Some other schools or some other fan bases are more resistant to that. And that's something that everybody in this conference is trying to work through right now. And with a new commissioner on point who said very pointedly, the best chance for a SoCon school to win a national championship is in FCS football at his media day remarks. That is something that I think is going to change, but it's going to take time. It's going to take work. It's going to take a real commitment to changing the attitude around football to match some of the realities that the SoCon has maybe fallen victim to in FCS football. And that's part of the challenge, or what has been the challenge, of getting multiple teams into the playoffs, which we did for the first time last year since I think 2018. It's been a long time.
So let's take a look. If you don't mind, I've got a preseason poll pulled up here. Kind of want to run through that, Brendan, if you don't mind, top to bottom here, and then get your take on the top. And again, if there's anywhere that you disagree or think that there's kind of a dark horse. So, honestly, I'm shocked. The coaches poll, which sometimes if anybody reads between the lines in a coaches poll, occasionally the other coaches, if they don't care for a program or a coach, will occasionally alter their poll and what they what they think.
You don't have to talk to me about internal politics. It's an unfortunate reality. But.
Yeah, there's some jabs, but all right, top to bottom. So you got a tie, Furman and Samford, which if you look at most national polls, Samford is very, very high this next year. A lot of offensive weapons coming in. Don't know a ton about them. Would love to hear more. 3, you've got Mercer. 4, Chattanooga. 5, which also Chattanooga, I think they've got a really cool looking stadium, don't they? I feel like I've watched a handful of their games.
Well, Findlay used to be the site of the national championship before Frisco.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I've enjoyed watching a handful of their games on ESPN Plus. Is it who carries you guys?
So we're mainly ESPN Plus.
Okay.
Yeah, everything is on ESPN Plus. We have some local TV with a TV station out of Spartanburg, South Carolina, but it's all on ESPN Plus for folks.
And just a
God
quick
bless you for it.
and just a quick sidebar. Quick sidebar. SDSU fans, Missouri Valley fans, if you've got ESPN Plus, there is nothing better than lining up a schedule. If you know who the solid teams are, what the good matchups are, if you have a little bit better understanding of the picture, and just you can watch great football, start to finish all day on that. And it's so fun because you get a lot of, this has nothing to do with Keith, the best Homer broadcasters you've ever heard in your life, calling games, and it's so fun. But all right, so back to this. Chattanooga 4, Western Carolina 5, ETSU 6, Wofford 7. I've been wanting to intentionally say it wrong to make your friend Kevin mad. I don't know him at all, so I don't know if I should. I was going to say Citadel. I was going to say Citadel. I was going to say Citadel College.
Copyrighted. You can't call it the Citadel.
I was going to call it. No, I was going to call it Citadel College actually, and just roll through and see if anybody reacted.
It's Citadel, the.
Yeah.
How you doing?
And then VMI 9.
Maybe.
All right. So Keith, anything you horribly disagree with? Anything you horribly disagree with, and who's the dark horse?
Well, I voted in the media poll, and my ballot looked virtually identical to this. I actually had Western Carolina ahead of Chattanooga. Chattanooga has a concern at quarterback, but I talked to Rusty Wright about it, and he said Chase Artopius is one of the most organized and eminently prepared guys. Whether it follows through on the field with athleticism and arm talent, we'll have to see, because he's never thrown a pass in college football in 4 years at UCLA. But the guy was super organized. He was very diligent in making his decision. He said he had a spreadsheet of like the 2 deep and a lot of historical stuff, and was just very detailed in making his decision. Ultimately chose Chattanooga from several SoCon schools in addition to others. But he's got to work for them to be in the playoff mix. Mercer to me is the dark horse. If they have a quarterback, which I think they think it's going to be the guy who stepped aside for Fred Payton a couple years ago, Carter Peavy, who started in the spring of 2021 for Mercer and is now a couple of years on. They bring back two of the best wide receivers in the country, certainly the best 1-2 punch in the SoCon. And Devron Harper, who's a special teams juggernaut, in addition to his playmaking ability on the perimeter on offense. Ty James is really, really good. They are a capable defensive team. I think they're certainly capable of winning the league. Beyond that, I think 6 is a fair pick for ETSU, given what they did last year, the changes they've made, and the expectation that they're not going to be 3-8 again. I think 6 is probably fair, given everything that team has gone through, but also everything that it still has from the team that won 10 games in the regular season in 2021 or in 2022. No, 21. But Furman and Sanford are the top two. It's a coin flip. I voted for Furman. A lot of people voted for Sanford, but Furman was the preseason favorite, both the coaches and the media polls, not by a lot. As you can see, the total number of points, they were dead heat. I think that's about how people see it. Those two teams play on October 14th, and that will be a doozy of a football game. Sanford has all the offensive weapons because, Michael Hyers has great chemistry with all his receivers. Obviously, Chandler Smith, who was a 1,000-yard guy last year, they bring him back, and he does a phenomenal job, not just in the catch and run aspects that Devlin Hodges really took advantage of with Kelvin McKnight a few years ago on his way to the Walter Payton Award. McKnight was just a slippery son of a gun. Like, he was so hard to cover and just stay on top of, and he could find ways to get open, and Hodges just knew where he was all the time, and they racked up a ton of yards and rolled down the field that way. Hyers has a little bit of that same chemistry, but at the same time, he's able to get the ball down the field a little bit more than Hodges was. And this offense is able to get the ball down the field a little bit more than it was when Duck was the guy in charge. I think this group is really, really good on offense. And defensively, people say, like, well, they didn't bring back any first-team all-SoCon defensive players. Well, they didn't have any last year, and they still won the conference and went undefeated. So do they really – the scheme was completely overhauled. They went out into the portal. They got a bunch of talented guys, and they made it work. And they pulled their entire defensive staff off the road this offseason. They just recruited the transfer portal for defense. And that is where they feel like they've been able to find success, is getting some older guys on their way from other programs. And it worked last year. We'll see if it works again for them this year. Furman brings basically everybody back. There's so much continuity there. And the places where they lost, they've managed to add. And they've added really good players. It's hard to look at that team when you bring back probably like 18 starters or something, and say, no, they're not the preseason favorite. It's hard for me to sit there and say that. But Sanford is that good. I think both those teams end up top 10 teams at the end of the year. We're talking about both of them for seeds. One of them will get it, and the other one won't, because their head-to-head meeting will be used against them.
So you look at Furman's schedule last year, they wind up, 10-3, 7-1 in the conference. They end up, going out in a very tight game against Incarnate Word. So, and you talk about a couple of teams where, primarily offensively driven. I'm sure they got great athletes on both sides of the ball, but that was a tough draw for them, and they probably could have made a real solid run. And I think people would be talking a lot more about them right now, if they had snuck by there.
I agree. A lot of teams were one corner falling down from beating Incarnate Word last year, but Furman was one of those teams in the second round, going to San Antonio, had a real shot at it, and what could have been for the SoCon if they had won that game. We're really starting to talk at that point about a third team or maybe even a fourth team. But the Furman has an opportunity to make some noise. I think with the right draw, it's the kind of team that could get lightning in a bottle and go on a run. Now, they have to avoid North Dakota State, South Dakota State, probably Montana State in the early rounds. But if they can do that, then they got a shot. And I think the same thing's true for Sanford. I don't think either of these teams is a Frisco team, but I think, again, right draw, right path, you could see them going to Fargo, going to Brookings, going to Bozeman late in December for a spot that they probably won't get. I just think those 3 teams are the most likely teams, and there's a real good chance that 2 of them end up meeting in the semifinal. So who knows? But I think Furman is good enough to get there. I don't know if they're good enough to get over the hump. And I think the same thing's true for Samford. I think they're good enough to get to a spot where they're going to be playing on ESPN in primetime, or ESPN2 in primetime, playing high-end college football late in the year.
So I got a question for you, Keith, because the biggest issue, I think, and probably everybody on here agrees, just a little bit more, it was rubbed in our noses as SDSU fans a little more because you ran into it all the time. The deeper in the playoffs you go, the more important home field advantage is, and the farther you're going to get. I mean, for argument's sake, if Furman's playing UIW at home, they probably win that game if it's not on the road. It's just plain college football logic. What is the potential? Because SoCon teams historically have always stubbed their toe and not taken care of business when they needed to. And that's what I throw in everybody's face when they're mad about not making the playoffs, et cetera, et cetera. Well, everybody who doesn't make the playoffs drop the game they probably shouldn't have. So, or you didn't get the seed you wanted, whatever. Which one of these teams do you trust more to not have a letdown? I would lean Furman myself just because of the experience coming back and probably defensive quality. But do you think maybe Sanford's high-powered enough to make it through the SoCon where everybody's so familiar and not get tripped up? And the out-of-conference too.
Yeah, I think
huge.
I think from a scheme standpoint, Furman is probably just, they're a little bit more reliable. Samford obviously has a very good offense. Defensively, they are prone to the occasional break. I mean, they gave up a lot of points to ETSU. They gave up a lot of points to Mercer, and that game went to double overtime. I would look at Furman, and I would say, their defense is going to travel. They bring back their top 10 or 11 tacklers from last year. That's a team that I would look at and say this is a team that I would be more inclined to trust. And I think that's why you saw a few more first place votes go their way, is when it comes down to it, which team's going to travel better, which team's going to be more consistent. Samford is more explosive, but Furman is probably more of the slow and steady wins the race type of football team. You're right though. I mean, Chattanooga has had opportunities to make the playoffs the last 2 years, and the last 2 years they've blown it in November. I think last year they went and got beat by Western Carolina, and I talked to Rusty about that. Their head coach, who has been there for a while, went to the playoffs, I believe, in year 1 and hasn't been back since. And I asked him, I said, what's the difference? What does this team have to do to get over the hump? And he just flat out told me consistency. He said, you have to have consistency in order to get to where this team ultimately wants to be. And losing that game late to Western Carolina last year, 32-29, that's the difference between them making the playoffs and not. But he said the mood from 2022 in the locker room, when he walked in the locker room after that last game of 22, was completely different from the mood of 2021. Team wasn't sulking. They were hungry. They wanted to go back out there and prove that they could do it. So this is a motivated Chattanooga team. If they get quarterback right, that's a team that I could probably look at after 3 or 4 games and say, okay, you've got what you need. You've got a really good defensive line. Jay Person's defensive player of the year last year, preseason defensive player of the year this year. He's got Ben Bruton next to him, who's going to be an absolute nightmare. They got Cam Brown anchoring the secondary. Really good offensive line. Alim Ford's back for his 18th year. It feels like he's been there forever. This is a team that can get the job done. Go do it.
All right, so let's run back to Furman real quick as it relates to Chattanooga. And then I think I want to jump on before we close here, maybe run back to the Big Sky quick. But all right, so Furman, we got Tennessee Tech. You got a game at South Carolina. Then you're at Kennesaw. They win that, right?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
Some of that, and then you got Mercer. You got the Citadel. Then they have to go at Samford. Then you got Western Carolina, ETSU at home, homecoming, and then at Chattanooga. So you're at both Samford and Chattanooga. The rest of them outside of the Gamecocks look like winnable games. I mean, does that feel like is that going to be too tough? Even if they're the slow and steady wins, you're at the other two best teams in the conference. Can they get through that?
I think so. Again, because their defense is going to travel with them, and it's going to give them an opportunity to win some football games. Now, Samford wears you out because Samford runs tempo all the time. They don't give you a chance to sub at all. Where some spread teams don't do that or haven't necessarily always done that, Samford does it every single time they have the football. And ETSU had what they called a recon package. Billy Taylor's the defensive coordinator. He loved putting hybrid safety linebackers on the field at a lot of different positions where you could cover a lot of the field on third down and let your defensive line just work. And Samford would get that recon package on the field after an incomplete pass, and they'd hit a completion for a first down, and then they just keep going. And you get that recon package stuck on the field, and suddenly Samford's got a ton of mismatches that they can exploit. Furman, I think, is a team that with so many returners, they are equipped for that. They are prepared for that. They are going to spend a lot of time under Clay Hendricks' tutelage getting ready for Samford's defense. And while I don't think they can keep them off the board, and I'm not even sure they can keep them out of the 30s, I think they have an opportunity to do enough to win that game. Their defense is going to be able to step up and make plays in key spots to give them an opportunity to win. But Samford is good enough to beat Furman. That is a tough path. I would say, honestly, you look at that 4, 5, 6, any of those teams is good enough to ruin Furman or Samford seed prospects. Any of those teams is good enough to get one over on them. There's enough talent there. ETSU has brought in some guys. They've had some turnover in the transfer portal on defense, but they've souped up the offensive line. They got a great true freshman running back that they've added to their room. In addition to Zach Borish, who I know is a big fan or a big beloved name for a lot of the Idaho folks in our FCS Fans Nation circles. And he's going to be in the mix. He's going to be a factor in the run game this year. But any of those teams in the middle of the pack, you got to be ready. Any of those teams in the middle of the pack is just as likely as Samford to beat Furman, just as likely as Furman is to beat Samford. It's going to be about, again, which team is most consistent is going to be the team that comes out of the SoCon undefeated.
So looking at when Dallas went through their schedule, there's one thing that really stuck out, and it wasn't just that it was at Sanford. So you're going from playing the Citadel to playing Samford, and that sounds like it could be kind of brutal on a defense. You're going from playing a triple or an option team now.
It's going to be a triple. I talked to Murray Strayton at Media Day. Great guy, really good guy. Just excited to have that opportunity to come back to his alma mater for, I believe, the third time. Player, coach, and now head coach. And you could just see there was a look in his eyes like, we're going to ruin somebody's year. Like, this might not be our year, but we're going to ruin somebody's year this year. And he wants to run a data-driven triple option, which just sounds cool, right? Like, the
That's
triple
amazing.
It's a 100-year-old offense, and you're going to bring in 21st century tech and data analysis. This is the beauty of getting an NFL guy. Is like, he's been exposed to all of this. So why not bring it back to college and see if you can make it work and see if that can give the Citadel an edge. I don't think this is their year, but I think they could get one where it's just like, how the hell did they win that game?
Does data bring back the cut blocks then? I'm just curious about that.
It's still, I mean, it's still going to be hard on your defense.
Yes,
and
it is. It's
Citadel is the kings of losing close. So there's always the potential of them sneaking a win on you if you overlook them. And then you've got to go from that triple defense to running your minds off against spread, no huddle offense. Like that's a tough test.
The only thing I would say is that, I mean, if you're a defensive back, you're going to play, if you're a linebacker, you're going to play one-on-one a lot against the Citadel because it's option football is man-on-man. Just get a hat on a hat and figure out the rest from there. With Samford, it is a little bit the same in that you are on an island against those wide receivers if you're a corner. You are expected to be all over your guy from the jump. And it's so getting guys in the mindset of, we're going to be isolated against this receiver. We're going to be isolated against this tight end. This running back is my sole responsibility. I think some of that can translate from the triple to the high tempo spread, But yeah, I mean, it's different pictures, but it's a lot of the same mindset. And if you can get guys to buy into that mindset over multiple weeks of I'm on an island, it's me against the world, it's me against my man, you have a chance to translate. I mean, you can make the X's and O's work if you've got guys that are mentally prepared for that. And that's the hardest thing that, I mean, any great football team has done. It's the hardest thing that South Dakota State has done or had to do is get the mental piece together. The hardest thing North Dakota State had to do in building its dynasty is get the mental piece together and keep it that way. And that's really freaking hard. We're not even talking about doing this over a time span of years. We're talking about doing it over a time span of weeks. And I think with a veteran group at Furman, you've got a group that can handle that turnaround as well as anybody could ask.
That's true. That's where the veteran part really comes into play.
Absolutely.
Big time. So are we going to Dallas is gone, so we've got an opportunity to play. Does Dustin want to crap on the Big Sky a little bit? I know he's been warming up the hate and just firing out comments. You know, if we want to, I mean, we could, our opportunities are endless. Dallas is gone. Nobody's, babysitting us.
I don't want to yuck anyone's yum too much. We're trying to, it's a new era in the SoCon. We're trying to mend fences, right? But at the same time, if we yeah. Oh man.
Oh, that was good. No, I mean, look on the Big Sky. What really surprised me about the Big Sky was when you saw the media polls, and there was no love for Idaho, and there was no, or as a coaches poll, there's no love for Idaho, and then in media poll, there's no love for Montana. And that kind of surprised me that people, maybe it's not really a surprise because Montana really shouldn't have been a playoff team last year. But, I just love it for, the Montana fans to kind of, have to throw them back at them.
The Big Sky is an amazing conference, guys. I just want to point that out.
Yeah,
it's so good. It's so deep and competitively balanced.
Their fans are the best fans in football.
So, the interesting thing about those polls, to me, we all mock the coaches poll nationally, and as we should. And if anybody's listening who says coaches poll is best poll because coaches know football, you need to shut off your computer, take a long walk. And I want you to contemplate just life and stars and all that stuff.
And how much time a coach has to think about the 23rd team in the nation or
the
whatever.
FCS, from
and I want you to remember that vividly the next time you watch a football team play and think, I could prepare them better than that.
Yeah. Right.
So to Andy's comment, though, where he says Idaho's the Big Sky dark horse, they're not.
Absolutely not.
They're not.
Everybody's calling them great.
The dark horse at the moment is Montana. Honestly.
And that's the thing. When it comes to national, these coaches, they just don't have the time to really know, right? I think we all know
their conference.
When it comes to their conference, they know those teams because that's who they play every year, and it's their job to know those teams, prepare for those teams, and get ready. So I put a lot more credence than into a coach's poll for the conference.
So I've got
and that's
Chad.
Why that was eye-raising to me.
Chad, there we go. You want to pull that up? So I've got the media and coaches poll for the Big Sky pulled up. If one of you guys wants to take that.
The Big Sky is number one at something, though. And it should not be missed. And that is something that the Missouri Valley has not even come close to matching. And that's how well they actually promote their conference and their teams.
They're phenomenal social media.
Because nobody's doing it like the Big Sky.
It's outstanding. Yeah.
Yep.
It is top notch. And I genuinely believe that has led to some of the rise of some of these Big Sky teams.
Gets an extra run in the playoffs.
Yeah. And that and just getting more fan interest in the conference gets more fan interest in your teams, and that drives the conference up. But yeah, if you look at, there's a huge difference between the preseason media's poll. Obviously, Montana State's up at the top, but then it's UC Davis in the coaches poll, which surprised me for about 10 seconds. And then I thought about it, and I remembered all us on JI because we were just getting, as SDSU fans, we're just hearing about it. About, oh man, that UC Davis game was so close. We're like, no, man, that's a real team. Like, they're pretty good. They had a really tough road to hoe, and they didn't make it. But thinking about it, it does not surprise me that they carry a lot of cachet with the Big Sky coaches. That's a real squad. I would not be surprised if they get second. And I haven't looked at their schedule. If I remember right, I was perusing fan boards because I do like entertainment on the weekends sometimes. And I do remember reading a couple people mention that UC Davis has a favorable schedule. With that team having a favorable schedule after the experience from last year, I could see him sneak in first place because Montana State has a tough road, mostly road games. And the thing that is forgotten a little bit from last year, and this is not saying Montana State's a bad team. They're a very good team. I expect them to be very good, but they really struggled on the road last year. Everywhere they struggled on the road. And it wasn't snowing in all those places. It wasn't even cold in some of those places. Some of them were in a dome or air conditioned, so their fans just can bitch about something else. But anyways, I digress. But that with having a bunch of tough road games, there's potential to make it difficult. We'll see. I'm sure they're much more mature this year. They were very young last year and did a lot better than a lot of people thought. So I'm sure it'll be first, but that is potential of a dark horse, if you really want to call it that, a real dark horse, not Idaho.
So let's run through UC Davis quick, talk about the schedule. All right, top to bottom. So we're at Texas A&M Commerce, which feels like a team you'd bring in.
What's their old name?
It's a home and home. It's a home and home.
Oh, okay, gotcha. All right.
No.
All right, so then they got their FBS game, Oregon State. Then they've got Southern Utah at home, Eastern Washington at home, who still hasn't probably returned to where they could be as far as I'm aware, and I'm not going to act like I know. At Cal Poly, they got Montana at home. Assume that's a W. At Weber, who I don't know enough about this year.
Shade to Montana.
I
caught that. That was awesome.
Then they're at Northern Arizona. They got Portland State at home, at Idaho State, and then Sac State at home.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess I'd call that favorable. I mean, they've got most of the road games are probably in the bottom half of the conference.
Yeah. I think the Sac State game is going to be the one that determines if they are champion if they get a seed or not. It's going to be that game. Honestly, their schedule looks great. Especially getting the Montana W. So it's hard to it's easy W. Team sucks, but no, they looked really good last year. They were really young. They bring a lot back, and I think that if you can't call them a dark horse because they're ranked so high, but they could be the potential conference champion if everything plays out right. Because I don't think Montana State goes through without getting a loss somewhere, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's possible. And the best case that Sac State game, even though it's on the road, it's kind of best case scenario with a new coaching staff coming into a squad like that, where you got a whole season's worth of tape on them. You're not getting them the first game of the year where they might have been holding stuff back out of conference and they can surprise you and get stuff by. So that's advantageous in itself. So, oh no, there are Montana fans watching.
You look at Montana State's schedule, and their road conference games are tough spots. They have to go to Weber, which is a difficult place to play. They have to go to Sac State, which could be challenging. They go to Idaho, which is probably going to be, whether Idaho's, necessarily like, ooh, Idaho top 10 team, place is going to be rocking. It's going to be rowdy. It's going to be loud. That's a tough environment to go into and win. That's where championship teams go and win, but it's tough. And then they got the brawl at the end of the year. So they're going to be, those are challenging games to go on the road. And every great team, when I was in Fargo, we like to talk about the clunker. And it's the one game where things just don't go right. Stuff's not clicking. It's like the moon's out of phase or something, and just routine passes get dropped. And
you mean Hobo Day versus you and I?
Yeah, could be. I remember we had one in 2019 We beat Missouri State 22-0. And the calls on Bison Hotline were, why did we only score 22 against Missouri State? What's wrong with the offense? What's wrong? What's happening? What's going on? People were
the
like
new
anxious.
offensive coordinator.
Just shut out Missouri State at home, beat them by 3 scores. And there was one against Youngstown State, 17-7. And the quarterback Youngstown was driving at the end of the first half. Quarterback spiked the ball on 4th and 2 at the 12 and turned it over at the end of the first half on downs. Because he was trying to stop the clock. He thought they got the first down and they didn't, and turned it over. And NDSU knelt out the clock and took the lead to halftime. They ultimately won the game by 10 points. But if that game comes at the wrong time, and even the 17 national championship team went to Brookings and turned the ball over 4 or 5 times. So those games happen, and if those games happen in the wrong place at the wrong time, you can get beat. So that's going to happen. It happens to every great team at some point. Things are just going to be a weird week in the middle of the season, and I would definitely look at that Idaho game and say that's an opportunity for Murphy to pay a visit, as Chris Kleiman liked to say. Yeah. Murphy visits your team.
So let me real quick. I'm going to run down both the coaches because I have them up. Coaches and media preseason poll for the Big Sky and what those differences are. Okay, and then I think if you guys don't mind, then maybe we can jump on to just kind of the top 25 preseason overall. And then this is weird for me. We usually keep the schedule and are done in an hour, right? Like an hour 10.
You need more time for this.
Yeah, no, this is too big. This is too big. All right, so
we're usually with Matt, and like the Podfather has his act together and follows the plan.
Yep.
You need to be like the dad on like that people post about on Twitter that has like the bar discussion topics.
That's
you have a list, and then there's general discussion at the end.
We don't know each other very well. You just described me perfectly. All right. Okay, so coaches poll, Big Sky Conference 2023. Come on, there we go. All right, so Montana State again. That's going to be top in both, and then coaches have UC Davis, Sac State 3, Weber 4, Idaho 5, Montana 6, Eastern Washington 7, Portland State 8, Northern Arizona 9, Northern Colorado 10. Jacks fans from the old NCC days remember Northern Colorado. Jump didn't go too well for them. 11, Cal Poly, 12, Idaho State. Now, media poll, big difference is going to be Idaho. So you got Montana State 1, Idaho 2 instead of 5, Sac State, UC Davis at 5 instead of 2, Weber State 6, Eastern Washington 7, Northern Arizona 8, Portland State 9, Northern Colorado 10, Cal Poly 11, and Idaho State 12.
This is where I think Idaho is going to be the SFA of last year, where they're such a media darling. But one other thing too is Idaho. I think they're getting dropped in the coaches poll because they have 2 FBS games right off the bat. They've got Nevada and they've got California on back-to-back weeks. And if they come out of that either 1-1 or maybe 2-0, then I think you'll see if then things are completely different. I think honestly, if they
win 2 FBS games, they jump us.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. If they win 2 FBS games, they're the number 3 team in the country. At least the number 3 team in the country.
Exactly. And Eck is a great coach, and so I think this is a great early season test for him. I think Keith is right about the Idaho Montana State game, and I hope somebody gets Chris Hammond a booster seat for that seat because it's going to be a lot of people standing up. You won't be able to see. But I think
bring him a shoebox to stand on.
Yeah, but I think honestly, the team that I think could surprise a lot of folks, and we haven't really touched on, is Weber State. Weber State's had injuries the past couple of years, and it's really hurt them when it's come to being able to be competitive. They look like if they have all their pieces, they are such a tough team. It's tough to go there and win. And so that would be the team you're looking at, a dark horse in the conference. I think it would be Weber State to look out for because I could see them easily being up there for championship consideration at the end of the year. Not national championship, I mean like Big Sky Conference championship.
I do want to point out that just for people who pay attention and to these things, Idaho has the 2 FBS games still from things they scheduled when they were FBS. So they're not doing what some, I don't want to call them poverty schools, but some schools do to balance the checkbooks and sell their players' souls instead of try to make the playoffs and schedule multiple FBS games. This is just something they had that hasn't fallen off the books yet, but they're going to get paid out the nose.
Yep.
Yeah, that's if those are artifact, are those still?
I think they
big
are.
Guarantees.
I think they are.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're still the big guarantees. They were last year. I know that for sure because everybody's like, "Whoa, who's
as soon as
for Idaho?" I'm like,
as soon as Sam Herder comes out with his article at the start of the season every year, we'll know. But yeah,
I think they are.
Sam,
I'm
wondering what's put out
see,
tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how durable.
Yeah, because he
JL's
watches this show.
culture is at Weber State. Like, I'm really curious to see how durable what he built is there, because like that team was one of the teams in the Big Sky that you looked at and said, "This is a gritty bunch of you-know-whats." Like they're tough. They were tough dudes. They prided themselves on being strong at the line, strong run game. With Davis at tailback and so many others that were really, really good. They could rotate them in. They never really got the quarterback position together. And now Mickey Mental is a very different coach with a very different identity, but also he's the guy that recruited Jaleel McLaughlin at Notre Dame College. And we all saw what Jaleel McLaughlin did in the Valley. So he's clearly somebody that has had success at lower levels of football as a head coach and now has an opportunity to do that in Ogden. I'm very curious to see what that looks like, if it's radically different at all from what he was in with Jay Hill's system. And Jay Hill's just the way he does business day to day in his program, which is modeled on the successful programs in the Missouri Valley. He told me that. He told me it was North Dakota State, but I mean, come on. There are a lot of successful programs in the Valley that people look to emulate. And it's not like North Dakota State is unique in the sense of the way it tries to build its culture. All the upper Midwest programs are very much the same in that respect, and the way they try to forge an identity. It's just North Dakota State's been able to get better dudes for longer periods of time. That's just kind of, that happens. But how durable is that at Weber? I want to know how durable, because at FCS, coaching cycles are so cruel and they can take away so much of your identity. We saw that last year at ETSU, where Randy Sanders retired and George Quarles was hired, and the team kind of had to figure out who they were under George's leadership. And that didn't really come together the way that everybody wanted it to. There was a change made in offensive coordinator after the first year. So George is now going to call the plays. And that's going to change some things. And it definitely feels like the group is a little bit more eyes forward, a little bit more focused, a little bit more closed ranks than maybe it was last season. And that's something that, it can take a gap year. It can take some time off. It's so fragile. And when you have a team that's been right there, that's maybe even won a conference title, that's been deep in the postseason, and the guy that built that led you there, that told you, like, you're going to come here and play for me for 4 or 5 years, get your degree, do whatever. That guy's gone. Does that outlast him?
Mm-hmm.
That's a challenge that every program at this level faces more than others. But Weber in particular is in the limelight for me in that regard.
It's interesting that they built the way that you said, trying to mimic North Dakota State, or just call it better Missouri Valley teams, because I think everybody's looking for that kind of same secret sauce. And I will tell you, you take the skill players you have, and then you go to Wisconsin and recruit O-linemen. And that is basically the recipe to do that.
Sioux Falls Roosevelt. Sioux Falls Roosevelt has.
Oh yeah, McCormick's my cousin.
Where there's nothing else to do but eat and lift.
Yep. All right.
Much.
So let's move on here because I have to get up at 4:45 in the morning and get my son to the ice rink.
Yeesh.
Hockey
life, baby.
Yeah, that's the hockey life. All right, so let's jump over. I've got CBS pulled up here. I can try to zoom in here. I want to get at least talk through top 10 to 15. There's a lot of polls, but so we got South Dakota State, North Dakota State. This one's got Incarnate Word 3. Spoiler alert, we'll talk about that later. Sac State somehow. What, I hate this poll. I wish I wouldn't have pulled this one up. All right, Montana State 5, Holy Cross, Samford, William and Mary, Weber State, Furman, Jackson State. Yeah, this poll sucks.
This
Richmond.
poll's not-
Is this the current
Is that
poll,
how
or
everybody-
Is it really?
I think
No, it isn't.
last year.
I googled.
Yeah, I
I
think
googled
so.
23. Hold on. All right,
Yeah,
I'm gonna
this
stop
is their
sharing.
old.
Updated January,
Hero.
updated July 30th. It says, but
No,
that looks old.
It
It feels
does.
old. It feels bad.
All right,
I
hold
do
on.
want to mention Holy Cross on out of all that mess, because we know Holy Cross is still highly ranked in a lot of the polls. I'm torn between. I lean more towards what my eyes told me, that Holy Cross had a very, very good team, particularly up front. They might have had a front that matched up with SDSU the best that we saw in the playoffs. Just from, especially on their offensive line holding up, and then Sluka was just tore us a new one on defense. That kid was a nightmare.
Well, when you don't have
I know
a
this
soul,
is
it's
going to
hard
be
tackle
because
you.
Holy Cross is going to be a fight all year. I know it. We've been giving him a hard time. We've never said his name, Kevin Marshall, FCS Nation Radio. So I know he's going to be on that bandwagon of, they don't play anybody. They're in the Patriot League. They don't deserve to be top 5. Well, until the SoCon proves it, then they can be in the top 5. But until then that's the way it is. And Furman could be that team this year. I'm very curious what happens with them, because they're starting highly ranked this year. They don't have an unwinnable FBS game. They're going to skate through the conference again. I saw some people, or the media poll, a couple people had voted Furman for the Patriot, but I don't see that happening with what Holy Cross is bringing back. It's still going to be a really stout, really good team. I think if they manage to get a top 4 seed, they have potential to cause problems if they don't run into a high-flying team on the road, like if they have to go to a Sanford or some team like that. I think they have a real potential, if they're a top 4 team, to squeak into a semifinal or possibly squeak past it. I don't think that would happen, but I think they're a serious threat, but they're going to be argued about all year long on the internets by everybody, because they're not going to really play anybody outside of their FBS game.
Yeah,
So
this isn't. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I was going to say, so I apologize if I still looking at that poll. I don't know who the hell put it together, but it doesn't say it's 2022. I think it's new. All right, so let's go back. I've got Hero Sports pulled up. So, all right, so South Dakota State 1, North Dakota State 2, Montana State 3, Holy Cross 4, Furman 5, Furman and Idaho tied for 5, William and Mary 7, Samford 8, Incarnate Word 9. See, that's the thing is, I guess I'll just say it. I alluded to it earlier. That's the thing that drove me nuts when all these different polls came out. There were so many that had Incarnate Word still up, like Lindsey Scott Jr. was still playing for them. And I'm not, no disrespect to them, but to me, you got to prove it. If you lose a player that good, you got to prove it. And then that.
And a coaching staff.
They did, though, because remember, they lost Cam Ward and they came in with Lindsey Scott Jr. and then went further than anybody thought.
And
they lost
they
Lindsey
just
Scott Jr. and they brought in Calzada from Texas A&M.
Yeah, and he started 10 games for A&M 2 years ago. So that's a guy that can play.
Yeah.
My concern with UIW isn't necessarily the quarterback they brought in. It's, all right, now you're having coaching staff turnover and huge roster turnover again. You're going into the second time this has happened within 3 years. I mean, you're going into your third year now. You've got another new coach, another new staff, whole bunch of transfers, and we've all seen with Missouri State and stuff like that where the transfer soup is a real easy one to leave on the stove too long and burn. Now, I think to their advantage is that they are in the Southland instead of in Missouri Valley, where you can run into 2 or 3 nasty teams in a row, and that completely breaks the morale. I think that's what happened.
Brent, sorry, is it you said Southland? I thought it was Southland. Can you explain?
Southland, yeah.
Southland?
Yeah, Southland. They don't play any defense there, and they don't get it back until they prove otherwise.
That's accurate. So, but Brendan, to your point, you're talking about the turnover there. I mean, their new coach, Killo, was the associate coach there. And before that, he was a grad student there. Like, so he's been around the UIW program. So I don't think, in most cases, you're 100% correct. I don't think this one's as big of a problem as you might see. And they're they've brought in, they're basically becoming transfer U, and they brought in a whole lot of transfers during the off season. And so it's really hard to doubt them in a conference where their biggest competition is going to be Southeastern Louisiana. And those two will go 1-2 in the conference again. It just depends on if there's a corner who falls down that allows Southeastern Louisiana to win with a backup quarterback again.
That was a wild game to watch, though.
That was so fun.
Man, UIW had some of the most fun games to watch last year. I mean, that playoff game with Sac State, that SELA game. Southeastern Louisiana. I would never call them SELA on purpose.
You call them SLU.
Yeah, they're SLU. They're like St. Louis University. Yeah, SLU.
Yeah, but to the point with that, it's actually I doubted Incarnate Word last year, and I ate my crow in Frisco. I'm not doubting them again this year.
You're just scared to eat crow again.
No, I'm not.
Smell that rabbit? Here.
Crows are intelligent and friendly. Why would you want to eat one?
I mean, there's people that eat dogs, so.
Yeah, no, but you're looking at another team that in there, Dallas is. William & Mary is probably primed to win the Coastal Athletic Conference again because they are Montana State. If you bought Montana State on Wish, and they'll just run through. Or
is it Timu?
Have you been saving that? Have you been saving that this whole time?
Oh my God,
man!
Wow, burning
wow, you kept that one in the chamber for a
Rev
long
comment
time.
there.
Wow.
The Wish.com Montana State.
Oh man. I mean, you're not wrong. You didn't have to say it.
Oh man, Rev is trying to end up on a hype video for a team in each conference across the USA. That's what he's trying to do.
He might have made a bulletin board for that one.
Yeah, just bringer of the hate. That's what I do.
All right, so sorry, we stalled out.
You were going, and then we just lost it.
No, we stalled out on my Incarnate Word ignorance. So let's keep going. Then we've got them at 9, Sac State 10, and I caught some heat on Twitter. We've got SEMO Southeast Missouri tied at 11, and I said there's somebody knows something about SEMO that I don't. Hold on, Weber also tied 11. North Carolina Central 13, New Hampshire 14, and the aforementioned SELA or not SELA, Southeastern Louisiana University 15. Montana 16, I guess, because they're still on the screen. All right, so anything there jump out to you guys?
Well, so SEMO's got Hess coming back, and that's why they're ranked so high. He's their biggest weapon, and also their stadium is finally done, I think, being renovated, so they can actually have a full crowd in there. To watch them, but no, they are right where they should be. They're going to win their conference easily. Their conference is crap because of the whole thing with playing with the Big South. Also, like they're just going to wreck shop. So they're where they should be. I wouldn't doubt that positioning in the poll.
I just don't trust an OVC team on the national scene. UT Martin they busted their butts. They threw everything they had at, scraped and clawed, and got a win over Missouri State in the first round. Yeah. But I remember vividly in 2019 when SEMO paid good money to host a first round game, and they got Illinois State with no quarterback, and they were licking their chops. And James Robinson ran for like 219 yards and a couple touchdowns. And Illinois State walked out of there with a win. And then they went to Conway the next week and did it again. So, I have a tough time trusting OVC teams.
That's where I was going with that. So, you can look at their schedule and say they should win the conference, walking away, whatever. Absolutely. But you look at a top 20, and you're telling me if they play Montana or North Dakota,
They gave Montana
a hell of a game. Yeah, don't forget that. They
got tired. They had that gigantic defensive tackle, if I remember right. I'm like, that guy's done. He's tired. That's a big guy. He's wore out. It's the third quarter, and he's not making an impact anymore.
Isn't it funny when you just know that? It's like the body language is so obvious. Like,
yeah.
this guy is just going through a lot right now. He needs to get in the tub and relax. And this is not as fun as it normally is. Like it's the terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. And you want to go to Australia. Like there's always a guy, right, where you just know, like, I'm done today. I'm done. It seems like there's always in a big game like that. There's always one guy when it's a blowout. Like there's all that hype, and then there's a blowout. And somebody gets in a hole, and it's just like, man.
That was the game that was giving me. I remember it vividly now because it started giving me flashbacks to the game that SDSU fans, we shall not mention, in the same stadium. And Montana had that huge comeback spurred by a kick return, if I remember, kick or a punt return. Oh. And I mean, Steamboat should have won that game.
A single guy beat us in that game.
Yeah, no. So we're not talking about that. Remember, we're
no, brutal.
Yeah, that was a bad day.
All right, so I gotta jump out here in a minute, but I'm curious. So let's just, and again, I don't want this to be like bulletin board or whatever, but I mean, I think everybody's opinions are of South Dakota State does what they need to do. They can make it to Frisco this year, so we'll just ignore that. Who will be there? Who's going to Frisco this year?
Furman.
So last year, last year, way early on the podcast, I said that South Dakota State was going to Frisco and winning, and and I was right, like always. So I'm gonna back, and I'm calling the game now. It's gonna be SDSU and Montana State in Frisco. And and the game on the 9th is going to be a preview of that.
That would be fun. It's gonna come down to two things. It's gonna come down to me, it comes down to who comes through their conference schedule with just one loss. Is it gonna be Montana, one loss or less? Will it be Montana State or NDSU? If both of them drop one or two conference games, like if NDSU drops 2 conference games and then they have to go on the road, I don't know if I have the confidence of them traveling to Montana State or even to, say, Furman. Say they got to go to Furman. I don't know if I have the confidence in them on the road. If they're at home, they win for sure. I hate to say it. I think it's going to be a rematch just because until the rest of the MVFC steps up and wins the games that kicks NDSU out of the Fargo Dome in the playoffs, they're going to keep going back. And with Montana State's road schedule, I have a hard time seeing any team that doesn't play in the Fargo Dome regularly. Once they show up there in the playoffs, it's so loud and intense in those games that it tends to carry those teams away once they start to get down. UIW felt like kind of a outlier last year, but generally you just get snowballed. So I'm going to lean NDSU until unless Montana State manages to go on a run and someone like UNI or even that UND game trips up NDSU.
I don't know what Jason Petrino's scheme is going to look like at North Dakota State. Mm-hmm. How radically different it's going to be with Matt Entz in charge, being a defensive guy. Are they going to stick to the same principles that they had under David Braun? Are they going to do something very different? Are they going to go back to Tampa 2? But to try to help out a thin quarterbacks room, like what is the plan there? The good news is, arguably their toughest 3-game stretch is the last 3 games of the season. At Jackrabbits, SIU at home, at UNI. They've got 8 games. Right? Was it 8 or 9? Yeah, 8 games to figure this out. And I always said that the worst thing you can give the Bison is time and film of themselves. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's going to end up Bison Jacks round 2, and I'm looking forward to it.
I would say this: if you're a Montana State fan or a Furman fan, you need to be the biggest UNI and UND fans in the world. Like, you gotta just be I would consider buying tickets to even go to Grand Forks. I don't recommend it. It's gonna be just not great.
Are you driving? Because that's brutal.
Oh, that's.
I wonder what Keith's take is on the Lara Center.
Well, you know what they say about North Dakota? Their favorite field trip from Fargo for the kids, they take them to Grand Forks to an overpass, and they can say, "I can see my house from here."
So, man, my favorite thing about the Alaris Center, some of you are going to know exactly what this is. Matt Gallagher is a referee in the Missouri Valley, and he's very distinctive because he's the only official that says good afternoon before the first penalty call of the game. And he had some microphone issues at the Alaris Center. And they
my God, I remember this.
Yeah.
This went viral.
So my favorite thing about the Alaris Center is its sound system.
My buddy installed it, oddly enough.
They've done some work there. They put in some new suites. I haven't been since the renovation. Obviously, I don't live up there anymore. But it can be when North Dakota State comes up there, it's usually a really good environment. It was a really tense game last time they went to Grand Forks, and it was fun to watch the Bison play in that big road environment in somewhere that, all due respect, wasn't Brookings, because we could pretty much guarantee that was going to be a big one. It was nice to have another one that was really that like big time and felt like a big time college football game where you knew somebody was really going to try to get up to beat you, because the worst thing about it wasn't even the loss. It'd be that you never hear the end of it until the next time you play. So that was fun. There's a lot of great people that work really hard to put on a good product in Grand Forks. Jack Michaels is great. I actually saw Jack in Lexington, Kentucky back in March at the WBI. He traveled with UND that was down there. And Brian Shawn is a TV guy. Of course, I know Brian and have for many, many years. And he is the absolute best human being in our entire profession. It's a stadium. It's full. And sometimes you can get the nicest, most mildest mannered referee to F-bomb 12,000 people at halftime. That was so good. I'll never get over that. It's all right. It's an all right spot. Honestly,
don't be a chicken. Say it.
Say it.
Don't be a chicken.
I haven't seen a game there, but I have been in it since the renovations. I kind of like the Dakota Dome a little bit.
No.
Just a little bit.
Having been to both, with my disdain for dome stadiums, I will say I like the Alaris Center. It's not terrible.
Their end zone where it just ends kind of sucks, though.
Yeah, that's what puts it below the Fargo.
All right.
I think we
have that in the mini dome too. Like we have, if you run through the back of the north end zone, you run out onto State of Franklin Road. So that's why we play it. That's why we built a new stadium.
It's probably for the best.
UND has to go to Boise. Sadly enough, I don't know enough about Boise this year.
UND just on the road
sucks.
Not their gag.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they get NDSU at home this year, so that's why I think there's a real threat of that happening. We saw what happened when UND had a worse team, and I think NDSU had a better team, and that was a hell of a tight game last time up there. Oh my, the sewer treatment plant. Hey, you know what? And some people like that, Keith. I used to work in the wastewater business. I get it. It's kind of got a home.
All right, so anybody national watching, we've got every year we pull up a side by side of a sewage treatment plant and the Dakota Dome, and you can't tell the difference. It's basically that Office meme where they show the same picture and then they say it's the same picture. That's pretty much what it looks like side by side. I like to say that I'm pretty sure they still fill it with corn in the off season.
You can't miss the fact that it's a discounted Unidome.
It is.
The sewage treatment plant was always the Unidome when I was up there. It was
nice.
Always.
Well,
that
they
was
literally
the everybody thought of as this looks like the water treatment facility.
They literally made the Dakota Dome to be a smaller version of the UNI Dome. So that's why
it's like the Ford Fiesta to the Focus.
All right.
You don't want to drive either of them.
Arena, so we have no room to talk.
Okay. I tell you what, hold on. I want to finish up. Who hasn't gone through? I'm curious who else thinks the Frisco matchup is going to be. Who hasn't gone yet? Brad, did you go?
Yeah, I've already gone.
Oh, no, he's frozen.
Huh?
You're frozen. What are you talking about,
Yep.
Dallas? You're frozen.
Yeah, Dallas is frozen. Bye, Dallas. He said he had to go.
Dallas,
Yeah.
Brad's not frozen.
He
He's
ran
just
out
picking
of
his
minutes
spots.
on his internet.
Hey, I've watched those videos where people pull this prank. So it's like
Brad's just picking his spots. He's an honorary Midwesterner. Like he will
just
wait
make him-
and wait, and then when you're not suspecting it, he'll just cut you to the quick.
Yep, that's what he does. That's his.
There you
that's
go.
his gag.
This is what you do with that.
Oh my God! For those of you
Deep
who
in
are
thought.
listening, an hour and 40 minutes into this on podcast
Podcast.
form, you
Oh,
might
man.
want to jump onto YouTube just to check this freeze frame out because it's
He's
beautiful.
probably gonna hate me for that.
Dallas
This is your
is
screen grab.
frozen.
This is your screen
Yeah.
grab.
That's a.
Oh, he took himself off.
Oh.
Here you guys.
You're gonna be mad at me now.
It's okay. I put it into a little Twitter thing for everybody to have.
Oh,
I heard him.
oh, he's got a rebuttal.
Hey,
There he
you
is.
got it.
Hey,
Hey, we
we're
weren't
back.
talking about you. What's up?
Dallas.
Oh, that's fine. My internet totally died,
Oh no.
We didn't notice.
so I heard none of it.
Did it? What did you?
Wait, make sure you go back and watch the YouTube. You won't be happy with me.
Nope.
I wish you could mark up so you could have started drawing with a marker.
Oh no.
That would have been amazing.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Oh,
Okay.
that would have been awesome.
All right. Well,
Screensaver,
Your
phone
just
background,
your frozen face.
wallpaper.
perfect.
I
Perfect.
got my shirt.
Yeah,
for
frozen
Frisco,
face for the
so-
frozen pond you need to get to in the morning.
Yep.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Right.
All right. I got a jet, guys.
Right on.
No.
All right, it's been fun. Thanks everybody.
It's almost 11. How you holding
Yeah,
on?
yeah. It's
Yeah,
probably.
Oh, me?
Keith works in radio. He doesn't have to get up
I
early
used to go to
tomorrow.
like 11:30 on D&D on Sunday nights. We went to 9 so that I could do this.
Perfect. So we've got 43 people still riding with us somehow, so we can go at least another an hour and a half, I think.
Let's-
right? New.
Yeah,
new
but
high
how much
score?
milk
No,
do you
I'm-
have left, Brendan?
Bring that.
I've been drinking the blue Kool-Aid. Actually, it's blue.
I
Wine
see
Punch.
that.
Yeah, I haven't gotten into milk during the chocolate milk podcast mode yet.
It's still
Because
preseason.
it's
I was gonna say you look like you were doing the. I thought you were doing the blue milk from Star Wars.
No, I got some. I do have some orange milk in the fridge. It's delicious. It tastes like an orange creamsicle.
You get
And,
the blue milk
yeah.
and the orange milk, and then you have a movie poster. Sorry, I just
Oh
spent
my
the last 2 days doing Barbenheimer, so like movie
Ah.
posters are very top of mind for me.
There you go. Right on. Oh my God. But no, so my curious question, since we went through Dallas's and everything for everybody here, not who makes the national title game, because I think that's a little it's less interesting to me, because you've got 3 to 4 teams that everybody kind of figures will probably make it. But who is your team that currently is outside of the top 10 that will do damage in the playoffs, win a couple games or make it to the quarters? Who is your team that's not in the top 10 that's going to cause that sort of damage?
I'm trying to think.
So I'll go
Last
first.
year it was
For me
Gardner
personally,
Webb, wasn't it?
for me personally, and maybe I'm because for the winning 2 games thing, I'm going to pick outside of the top 10. Well, and it almost feels like cheating because they tend to do this. You and I, they're going to go 7-5. Their first round game is going to be whoever. I don't even care. They win the first round game usually. It's just what they do. And then they're going to go, and if they get sent to, say, Sanford or a Furman, that'd be a really fun game against Sanford. Seeing Theo Day chucking it all over the field against
He's a
that
baller.
Sanford offense,
Michael
that would be
Hires,
yeah,
Yeah.
Mike Hires. I mean, that would be a fun matchup. But I could see them winning 1 or 2 games, making the quarters, especially if they get their defense straightened out, because their problem for decades has been, well, not decades, that's excessive. They've had some pretty decent quarterbacks. But their problem for a while now has been, well, if we had an offense to go with this defense, we'd be a really good team. Well, now it's, if if we had defense to go to this offense. And I think they might put it together this year. They do have slightly more transfers than normal. It almost feels like Farley's pushing his chips to the table, but Lowney, yeah, I know everybody that is outside of the Missouri Valley Football Conference loathes you and I being ranked because
They don't get it though.
Always
No,
ranked.
we
They're
get
always,
it. We
they're
get it.
always ranked, but they don't have a record to go with it. And
But the
I
talent
understand
is
it.
there.
The talent's
talent is
there. They
unreal.
just can't finish. And honestly, and I might get hate for this, but it's time for Farley to step down. That might be the best thing that happened to you and I. Would get someone else in there, someone a little bit fresher. I know all the donors love him and stuff, but it's time. It's time for him. Maybe that may be why he's got all the transfers this year. Maybe he's putting all his chips all in to try to get him before he goes out. But I think that would be the best thing for the school or for the team would be for him to just step aside and bring someone young and fresh into.
Well, you get a DC back from an FBS school after he left for a year and comes back to be DC again.
Yeah.
And it feels like you're pushing a bunch of chips in the table. It's possible that that's the game plan.
Yep.
One big swing and see what happens. Saw that
or
Stig got out. I
no
mean, they've been friends forever, and see Stig going, hey, I'm done. Maybe that's in his cards. Who knows?
College football these days is definitely a young man's game.
Yep.
I mean, we ran into that last year where we just had last second gaps in our coaching staff, and they called up Darrell Day, who used to be the defensive line coach, and he was going to retire. And they said, "Can you get us to the next 6 months?" And he said, "Sure." And not only did he get him through the next 6 months as the D line coach, he gave him 2 players, connection to the New Orleans area, and so they got Brendan LeBlanc, who's a pretty good defensive line prospect, and Torrey Lambert, who's going to get 4 games at running back. So, I mean, it kind of worked out, but you're seeing a lot of older guys that are just saying the recruiting environment is too much. Gary Downs was our running backs coach. He said, I got a kid in the NFL. I got a kid that's going to start at Alabama. I'm going to retire, and I'm going to book my Saturday and Sunday wherever Bama and wherever my kid gets drafted in the first round. I mean, Matt Luke, this is not an FCS thing. Matt Luke was the offensive line coach when Georgia won the national title. He had all that buyout money from Ole Miss when he was the head coach there. And he said, this is miserable. I'm just going to go I'm going to take Giles' advice from Street Fighter. I'm going to go home and be a family man. He went home. He's a stay-at-home dad now.
What a reference.
Wow. What a reference.
Wow. I mean, and coaching at professional levels is a grind anywhere. Craig Counsell for the Brewers is looking at possibly retiring because his kid's in high school and he wants to watch his games. Yeah. Completely not relevant, but sort of relevant.
It's so relentless now, and it's always on, especially with the transfer portal. You're constantly not just recruiting new guys, you're having to re-recruit some of your guys that are wondering, am I good enough to go to the next level? Am I good enough to do this? Am I good enough to do that? Do I need to go into the transfer portal and see what happens? And ETSU had some guys that went in the portal that, it was not all Mai Tais and Yahtzee, to borrow a Con Air reference. I got a ton of them.
What are we at? Is that 5? That's 5 good references
5,
since I've been on.
Yeah.
Can we get to 10 tonight? You think you can get to 10 tonight with us?
10 movie references or 10 references?
Just pick all of them, all the references.
Just 10 references
in general.
Oh golly! But it wasn't what they were expecting. Nobody was rolling out the red carpet for him. Like some guys had some interest, but it ultimately didn't materialize. And they decided my best option is going to be coming back and playing here and doing my thing here for one more year. For the last year of eligibility, I believe for Steven Scott, linebacker who went in the portal, came back. Devin Brantley went in the portal, came back. DeAndre Davis went in the portal, came back. I mean, that's 3 really important guys in your defensive front that, dipped their toe in the water and didn't like the temperature and decided, I'm going to stay here. That's just the environment that we're in now is you got to re-recruit your own roster, and young guys are willing to build those relationships and do that. And there are some older guys that say, I've been in this too long. I don't have the patience for this anymore. And just hanging them up and walking away. And I don't know that it's something that the NCAA needs to do something about necessarily in terms of we have to step in to make sure that, older coaches are, but at the same time, it does have a brain drain effect on the profession where you're going to get, less experienced coaches. Coaches are going to there's going to have to be a big vacuum of people, or a big vacuum created by people leaving that has to be filled. And those people are inherently not going to be the first choice to fill that position, because you're getting people leaving the industry before it's time to retire, or because it's time to retire. It's going to be it's going to be a challenging environment. And my profession's the same way, honestly. Like a lot of broadcasting turnover and burnout. Loyola Chicago is a great gig, and they're on their third broadcaster in 3 years. I mean, that's just kind of how North Dakota State's on their third broadcaster in 3 years.
Yeah, we're awful spoiled with who we have. So
Tyler,
he ain't going nowhere.
Yes, you are. Tyler is
amazing,
unbelievable. He's not just a great broadcaster.
He's awesome.
Like, he's really good, but he just talks to people like having a normal conversation. Everybody is the same. He treats everybody the same, whether you're John Stiglmeyer or Stig Johnson from Aberdeen. Like, it doesn't matter. And that's the best part of Tyler. And I do miss seeing that guy on the circuit. John Thayer too at USD is a really good guy. Like, there's some great people in that part of the country that do this, but it's a hard profession, and all of them will tell you it's hard to get into. It's hard to stay in long enough to really make it. So, I empathize with a lot of these coaches, but it's getting challenging with the way that the portal works, and loading up on portal guys can probably take you off the road a lot, because you're just making phone calls and watching film at home. But at the same time, you don't get the same experience out of it. You don't get the same culture at a program out of it. And it's not the same as it used to be.
So I got a question based off of that, especially with, you and Rev here being also, because SDSU historically has been considered a basketball school. And this is something I have toyed with in my mind. The portal, to me, seems to be massively affecting mid-major and low-major conferences to a much more extreme level than it does a football team, because there's less guys. If you lose 5 transfers off of a basketball team, you've lost a third of your team. Yeah. Whereas in college football, you've got it. It takes a huge, much larger amount of transfers to make that sort of impact on your team. Yeah. Is there a potential where schools like Stephen F. Austin or ETSU see, like, it feels like SDSU has started to invest more into becoming a football school. And I think part of that has to do with being able to get local media right deals that are valuable. And and the possibility of having continued success in it compared to the transfer portal extreme turnover world that college basketball is becoming, and how much of an effect losing a star in basketball has compared to football. Is that something that you could see getting more investment from a school like an ETSU or Stephen F. Austin into their football program because of that potential? Or is that just a non-starter because of market-wise it's too hard with the FBS schools to get media deals and things like that?
I can tell you from our perspective that it's two different revenue streams in a sense, because football is entirely driven by the member schools of a conference at this level. It is an independent sport in the respect that you don't get any dispensation from the NCAA. We get very little from our media. ESPN's a great partner. They're a demanding partner, but they're a great partner. But I'm not telling you anything our athletic director hasn't gone on the record about. We get $68,000 for our ESPN Plus contract. Every school in the SoCon gets $68,000. We have to produce 65 events for that contract, and that's not a lot of money.
$1,000
in the grand scheme of it, it's like it's not. We're not talking about even the whatever $450,000 that FCS schools, Conference USA schools are getting, let alone the whatever $2 million that North Coast State got for its football and men's basketball rights, let alone what SDSU is getting, which is a very healthy amount of money, I have to imagine, let alone what UND is getting for men's ice hockey at Midco. There's a very big disparity between what happens in the Upper Midwest and the rest of FCS. But our football is driven by ticket sales. It's driven by donate. That's what engages the alumni, what engages the donors. That is going to remain a priority. Men's basketball is a completely different world for us because you do get that tournament unit from the NCAA, and I think that's coming for women's basketball as well. I think you are going to see probably next. I think it's next summer. You're going to see the NCAA take the women's basketball tournament to market as a standalone property, and it's going to go from pulling in $30 million as the lead piece of a $30 million package to pulling in probably like $50 or $60 million on its own because it's that valuable. And the ratings last year for the Final Four were outrageous, and they're only going to get better because a lot of those stars are coming back. So that is a huge money-making opportunity, but it's a different kind of money-making opportunity because it depends on what you earn in the postseason, whereas football is dependent on what you can earn in the regular season with your game day experience, with all the signage that comes with it, again, the donors and the luxury boxes and all that stuff that you don't necessarily or aren't necessarily able to sell for basketball. As far as the portal, I think it's going to be very different between the two sports because in football, the issue that we ran into is that you lose a lot of depth. You know, we lost guys like Solomon Dunn, wide receiver. Wasn't going to play here a ton, but he went to Tennessee State. And that's somebody that now you can't have on scout team or, can't take reps with the twos to fill in when Adriel Clark gets banged up or when Xavier Giardetz is banged up like he is right now, but he'll be good to go for camp. Like those guys help patch holes in your program, and now a lot of those are gone. With basketball, there's just fewer roster spots for those guys to move on to. And there are about to be a lot fewer guys in the pool because all the players that have 2 years of eligibility left that are grad transfers with the COVID waiver, they're all in the portal. So, and there's a lot.
There's been a lot of people left out to dry on the portal, I mean,
they
test the waters, they get backfilled, and then there's no spot for them to come back to. So it's a little bit dangerous that way.
You can spin that around and say, well, okay, you lose a lot of guys to the portal, but you can also rebuild a roster really quickly in the portal. That's what we went through at ETSU. Look at San Diego State. They just played for a national championship built primarily on the back of portal and JUCO guys. Well, ETSU has experience with that because Steve Forbes was doing it before it was cool. And he won a lot of games by doing that. He had a 30-win season at ETSU doing that. And he took that to Wake Forest. And we'll see if that ultimately bears out for him. He's been but I think it's going to get there. And Brooks Savage has been able to go in the portal and get 7 guys that all are going to have an opportunity to contribute this year. And the team is way better. They're way more athletic. They're just the chemistry's better. Your team can fall apart really quickly, but you can also rebuild a team really quickly with guys that suddenly don't have anywhere to go because they use their one-time waiver to come play for you. They go anywhere else, they have to sit.
That's true. No. Should have had one of us triumvirate. I said it right. Guys jump on to speak about the chaos and fun of UIW in the portal. It's unreal what unfolded down in San Antonio. Yeah, you guys are the experts. No, don't worry.
Sure.
Don't worry, Andrew. I was nice about UIW this time and said that you guys made good moves in the portal.
Yeah,
that's 100% rev.
Well, gentlemen, it is coming up on 2 hours here, so I think it is this is definitely our new high score on JI. Chad has finished his delivered drink from Sam. Third delivered drink from Sam. My wife probably wants me to get to bed knowing her. So I think on that note, we're going to let it go. We are going to do our traditional ending. So you guys feel 100%. Free to jump in or not. You don't have to. So
I mean, otherwise, it works for you, Rev.
No, it would be go big, go purple, go Jags.
Yeah, but purple's like
the color of royalty.
It's a blue derivative.
The color of royalty.
I'm not going to make you do it, Keith. I get it. But on that note, thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen. Did we mention any of our sponsors? I have not been paying
We
attention.
did not.
Did not.
None.
Did
Thank
not.
you to Kubota of South Dakota, Culver's of Brookings, as
Watertown.
well as Jackrabbit Central.
Yeah. I do want to say before you do your thing, this was awesome. I had a great time. I will gladly come back on anytime and rap about SoCon or whatever you want.
Yeah.
We can talk about. I can come on and talk about Barbenheimer, right? Whatever you want me to do. But you guys,
We talk movies or something. You know?
yeah, 100%. You guys do a phenomenal job. And it's always fun to go back and forth with the haterade. It's like, oh, the Jackrabbits. When you're in Fargo, you guys have always done a fantastic job. I have been reading the previews. I've caught up on the Valley because I'm like Joe Buck. I got out of FCS football for like 4 weeks and all my knowledge was gone. And so I'm relearning so many things that I knew or thought that I knew. Like Hunter Zenzen is back at North Dakota State. Called that when he committed to Iowa State. But I'm learning so much from you guys that I feel caught up on stuff in the Missouri Valley. I think you do a really good job of incorporating the entire conference, and just salute to you guys because there's so much work that needs to be done, and it's awesome to see fans that are dedicated enough to it to make it into like a second passion or even a first passion because you guys got sponsors. That's big time. You're doing a phenomenal job. Keep up the great work, and we'll certainly have our ears tuned to you down in Northeast Tennessee.
Hell yeah. And anybody watching, be sure on FCS Nation, FCS Fans Nation, jump on Keith's show. I don't know. It's Fans Nation now, right?
Fans Nation Network.
It's just
now.
Fans Nation because some people decided that they didn't want to associate with the unwashed masses in FCS.
Brandon.
Anyways, jerk.
Brandon.
Come on. It for everybody. He does the outline.
Whoa.
Not even dark Brandon, just Brandon. Come on.
Brandon.
Yeah, God. The Jay and Keith show. Dustin has the show to be named later. Since it's baseball season, I'm just throwing the show to be named later. I
like that actually.
Yeah. That'd be a good name.
That actually might be the name.
I think that's a great name. I think he just named it.
I think that's what it's going to be. I may need a new podcast partner too. So we'll
Miller Park
show without a name.
Yeah, with a host to be named later. This is perfect.
Yeah,
this is perfect.
The show has no title, no name.
I love it.
And with that,
please, if you are listening, if you have made it through 2 hours of this somehow, some way, God bless you for doing it. Please give us a like, a follow, a rating on Jackrabbit Illustrated YouTube. Follow us on Facebook. Follow on the podcast. Follow Keith on Twitter. I believe it's at Keith Break on Twitter, right?
_breakdown.
The _breakdown. He's still the breakdown. That's right.
Yeah, still. That never dies, baby. That breakdown never dies.
Great show name. I mean, you can't not go with that. You can't not.
And I came up with that sitting in the parking garage at ETSU, and I called Jeff Colhane because I was going to call it something, and then they called it something else, and they said, well, we're going to call our midday show this, and so I was like, well, I got to come up with something. Why not?
Perfect. And of course, every Jackrabbit fan's favorite non-Jackrabbit podcast host, The Rev, the man, the myth, the legend. Follow him on Twitter. Give a like, follow, review. Little bit of watch on the YouTube of Fan Nation Network or Jackrabbit Illustrated YouTube. It just helps us a lot. Give it a share. Always trying to grow this, having a lot of fun. So thank you all for joining us tonight. And with that, all I've got to say is go big, go blue, go Jack.
Go Bucks.
See you September 9th, Brookings.